Hello, I'm Casey Aiken, and this is 21 This Week. Coming up next, Montgomery County budget gets mixed reaction from county council and the public. Baltimore County thinks all community colleges should be free. MCPS midterm math and reading proficiency results are dismal. How can this be changed? And President Biden wants to finish the job, whatever that means. Our panel of insiders will give you the story behind the story. We're joined by a former county council member and CEO of SkillSmart, Mike Knapp, and former chairman of the Montgomery County Republican Central Committee, Reardon Sullivan. Stay tuned for these stories and more on the next 21 This Week. Details of County Executive Mark Elrich's $6.8 million budget that includes a 10% property tax increase are exposed. Spark debates are coming from all quarters, including the county council and the public. At a public hearing last week, speakers voiced their concern. Avi Adler, board member of the Greater Capital Area Association of Realtors, spoke for many when he said, "The large property tax increase that has been proposed seems inconsistent with the current economic landscape." Mike, as a former council member, how do you balance the concerns expressed by Adler and other business leaders and the needs of the county?
Well, I think it's more than just Adler and the business concerns. I think the reality is that a lot of residents are very concerned as well. In addition to just what he's proposing for property tax increases, most people's property assessments are increasing as well. So most people are going to see a property tax increase anyway. And so that's irrespective of whatever Mark has proposed. And so I think that there are a lot of resources that exist in our budget right now without having to raise 10% property taxes, which candidly, if they could reapportion what the county executive has proposed, you could come pretty close to meeting the county's needs without a tax increase. I just, when you look what's out there, it just doesn't make any sense. And the challenge is he's got so many gimmicks in what's out there that it makes it really challenging. So even the pay increases, he's masked because he's phased them in. So in year one, it looks like there's only about $60 million in increases when the reality is it's over $100 million once you annualize it. So there are just so many things. We could probably spend the next 20 minutes talking about the challenges and fallacies associated with this budget.
Well, you just covered my second question to you, so we just saved 5 minutes.
That's okay. I've got more I can put out there.
Good.
Rest assured.
Reardon, you ran for county executive in the past election, so you must have some ideas about this proposed budget by Mr. Elrich.
Absolutely. First of all, Mike, I want to thank you for that introduction. You could actually be a Republican. That was great. And when you look into the budget, really,
I like to think it's more just being rational.
Republican rational. We're
nice try.
The narrative that Elrich is putting out there is that the tax increase is basically for our schools, and at the end of the day, that's really patently false. There are many agencies within Montgomery County that are actually getting double-digit increases and above what's being proposed for the schools. And like you were saying, we need to really look at the budget and examine the budget. I looked at the Montgomery County checkbook, which is basically the check register for last year, and I found over 25,000 checks written to, quote, anonymous. And that dollar value totaled over $155 million. When you take a look at our debt, our payment on our debt, basically our credit cards, we're racking up debt at an incredibly high rate. That's like the second highest line item in the budget when you take out what's being allocated for schools. Also, the fourth highest expense item is, quote, not defined. I know, Mike, as a business owner, if somebody brought you a budget with the fourth highest line item says not defined, you say, no, you need to go define it and give me a real budget. I mean, realistically. Yeah. And your point is spot on. The real increase to property tax is not 10%. It's actually going to be closer to 15 when you factor in the increase in the assessments. Also, the budget has over $20 million in what's known as future grants. I mean, back in the day, we would call that parked money. And the residents are really getting upset. I mean, when we use our phones, we get taxed. When we
So
use,
Reardon, I want to follow up with Mike because, Mike did talk about some of the budget gimmicks that are there. So, are Montgomery County residents just becoming the piggy bank for Mark Elrich's excessive spending plans?
Well, I think, part of the challenge that we really are confronted with is people paying attention. We all know, unfortunately, that people tend to pay attention to things that happen at the federal level, and things that happen at the local level actually have a greater impact on kind of their day-to-day lives. And so if you listen to, as Reardon said, to Mark's perspective that this is all for education, which is false, I think that people go, oh, well, this is for schools. That can be true. A portion, I think, will be going to schools, but the reality is there's no clarity as far as what that plan for schools is. And so I think, at least in the communities I've talked to, people are starting to ask that question of, okay, if we need increased resources for these activities, tell me what those are and tell me what we're going to spend it on.
Now, is that coming from the council members or is that coming from the public?
I think it's coming from both. I've been actually impressed with a number of the council members, how they're approaching the budget. So basically, they've taken everything that the county executive has proposed and park that on a reconciliation list so it all competes with itself, as opposed to assume it in a base budget analysis, which is different than what they've done in the past. So that's actually a pretty good sign, and unusual for them to do that. But I think one of the biggest concerns I have is that the county executive, by trying to say this is all for schools, basically is trying to avoid the charter, the number of votes required for the charter limit to ultimately have a tax increase because of a loophole that exists within the state budget. And I think that that's a piece, people, that the council really needs to stand firm on, because it's fungible, and we've got to make sure that this is if they're going to pass it, it's got to be a unanimous vote.
Well, so Reardon, this next question is for you, and it kind of bleeds into our next topic about the quality of our schools. Columnist David Rubin, who's with the American Enterprise Institute, wrote a piece that says Montgomery County is becoming the next San Francisco. Now, some can say that's a great thing because San Francisco is so pretty, but his piece is rather negative. And let me read a little bit from it. San Francisco and Montgomery County have much in common. They have roughly the same population. Both became magnets for educated professionals attracted by niche jobs and top schools. Both are essentially one-party governments, but the problem is not partisan, rather the lack of accountability when any party dominates for so long. Like his compatriots in San Francisco, Montgomery County Executive Mark Elrich has embraced both big government and progressive fads. He recently proposed a 10% property tax increase and a ballooning budget that dips deep into county reserves and commits the county to future mandatory spending as a recession looms. This in turn will mandate even greater tax hikes, and et cetera. Reardon, what's your reaction? Is Montgomery County on the road to perdition?
I've often said that Montgomery County is California East, and that's exactly true. And I think part of the result will be the people that can leave because we're being overtaxed and overregulated will leave. That's going to reduce our tax base. And not so we don't have as much money as we would like to have to do the things we really need to do. The average income in the county is going down, and I think he's spot on.
So,
Mike, any thoughts about Reardon's? What
I
Reardon
don't think it's quite as dire, and I'm not sure that we're California East. I do think there are concerns, and I think that this council so far has actually started to raise the right questions. So, I mean, accountability can be two parties. Sometimes that just becomes partisan politics. So I don't necessarily know that one party in and of itself is a horrible thing. I generally have always said, I think having both parties represented moves the ball forward because you get a variety of viewpoints. I think the bigger challenge this year, and one of the things we've got to really pay attention to, is how do these decisions that this council is going to make impact the next 2 to 3 years of our county, because we don't have that many resources. And the part I do agree that Reardon put out there is we are seeing our tax base decline. We are seeing people leave. And the reality is we've got to be able to understand that and make sure that we're budgeting appropriately. And we can't already have ourselves in a cyclical structural deficit for next year before we even get this year's budget passed.
Well, one of the most important elements that of our county, one which we are very proud of, is our school system. And the school system is losing students, and while the funding is going up. And recently there was the evidence of learning data released this week measuring students' efficiency in student education. The data measures the proficiency for students in kindergarten, third grade, sixth grade, and ninth. Reardon, overall in math, only half of these students met the benchmarks. More shocking is that 70% are proficient in kindergarten, which is kind of shocking, but by sixth grade, only 48.9% are meeting the EOL benchmarks, which means that the longer a student is in MCPS, the less they learn.
That is so ironic. And I saw a quote from one of the administrators saying, well, that's unfortunate. And I would offer, no, that's actually tragic. We need to address that. But it's also somewhat predictable in that the county, with the county shutdown, what they're teaching, the basic curriculum. And we also got to understand money doesn't solve problems. Just throwing money at something is not necessarily going to solve the problems. We need to look at the ratio of students to administrators and make sure that, and teachers, to make sure that we have a better ratio. And again, like you said, people are leaving Montgomery County. They came here for the school systems, jobs, and public safety. And those are things that Montgomery County is basically failing on. And those are things we need to address.
Well, you went to Wooten High School. Is the quality of education the same as you had when you graduated from Wooten?
I'd say it's definitely different. When I went to school, there was a strong focus on what we would call STEAM, science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. And now I think the curriculum is also more focused on social issues, which I don't think are going to carry our students to the best paying jobs when they get out of school and when they have to be on their own.
So, Mike, you've been deeply involved in educational issues. What is your assessment of these proficiency examinations? And is it just, bad luck that some of these students had to go to school during the pandemic, or is there a fundamental problem in the way Montgomery County educates its students?
I think the answer to that is yes. I think there's some positive elements in what you said. So the fact that we have a high level of proficiency with kindergartners is good because it points to the impact we've had in increasing early care and education in the county. And I think you're seeing that as a benefit. So I think that's a positive. I think the challenge with you're looking at sixth graders is the last 3 years, they've had an array of teaching modalities. And I think that's been a real challenge. And we've seen that across the entire country. So I don't buy the premise that they get less educated as they go through Montgomery County public schools. I think it's a result of the pandemic, but I appreciate the tongue-in-cheek nature in which you presented that. I think one of the things that's really important, if we're going to look for significant increased investment in schools, there's got to be a clear plan. You go back 20 years ago and you look at the challenges we had between underperforming schools and those who were actually meeting the challenges. And we ended up establishing what were called the red zone and the green zones to be able to make sure we had targeted interventions in schools that were challenging or for populations that really need additional support. If you look at what the MCPS has put out this year, it's basically 12 bullets of nice things. We should target mathematics and literacy. We should fairly compensate our community heroes, our teachers. We produce highly skilled workers. We talk about these things, but there's no substance behind it that I've been able to find. And I think we've got to really have a clear plan of what are we going to do in math and English literacy for the array of students that we have, the very culturally diverse schools that we have, and be able to do that. And I haven't seen that plan. And I think that's the challenge that we have. And I don't think anybody can clearly articulate what that plan is.
Well, we only have a brief amount of time left, and I did want to touch briefly on the incidence of anti-Semitism and racial stereotypes that are occurring at some of the schools. I don't know if we have time to do that, but if anyone has a minute of thoughts on that, I'll turn it over to either one of you. No idea. Now, the hard thing is the superintendent wants to challenge this by having, group meetings and concentrating on this. I think it's a problem that begins in the home, not in the school. But that's just my philosophy on this. And unfortunately, Mike, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
We're running out of time. We'll save that. We'll say, which is a much broader and bigger topic.
It is.
We'll save it for another week. When we come back from this short break, is the answer to having an educated business workforce to make community colleges free. And President Biden will be 86 when his second term ends. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Baltimore County Executive John Olszewski believes that community colleges play a vital and underestimated role in the education of society and is proposing to essentially make enrollment at Community College of Baltimore tuition free. Mike, as a board member of Montgomery College, that must be music to your ears.
Well, I do agree that community colleges do play an often unsung role in preparing our workforce for the future. Montgomery College has nearly 55,000 students that take an array of courses there, and we work directly with our local employers to make sure that they're acquiring the skills we need to actually bolster what our local economy needs. One of the misnomers, though, I think, is when we say college free, people are like, oh, we're just going to write a check, they're going to walk in the door and anybody can walk in. And the reality is that there are a number of funding programs like Pell Grants, like state aid, that provide steps first to reduce the cost for students to attend. And what County Executive Olszewski is providing is for those students who meet certain wage criteria, that what basically, if after taking advantage of those available funding opportunities, if there's still a gap, they will help try to close that final gap, that last dollar to get those students in. And I agree that we should make sure that all of our students have skin in the game to be successful. And what we've seen in Montgomery College is that for students to be able to put those pieces together, most of whom are actually working while attending, this provides level accessibility that allows them to attend, allows them to be successful, and allows them to more quickly get into our workforce and help grow our local economy.
And Reardon, you're an engineer. I assume you think that education is a valuable commodity and would support this.
I want to second what Councilman Knapp was saying about the importance of education and how the community college does fill a vital role in the education of our citizens, of our students. But there is obviously the con that causes an increase in taxes. And there's some people that it's been said that when they go to college free, they don't take it as serious as those people who, as you say, don't necessarily have skin in the game, and that nothing's free. And I'm going to circle back real quick to the budget. When we look at the budget, the amount of money spent of proportion for Montgomery College is actually 5.1%, and that's of the total overall budget when you take into account the Montgomery County public schools. Take the public schools out of the equation, that's 10% of our budget. That's actually less than the spent on the debt. That's less than the spent on other special programs. That's almost as much as what we can't find with the unknown checks. So I think I agree with Councilman Knapp that there's probably enough money in the budget to fund things like this that are important, but we need to make it not only available, but to find the money within our means to make it happen.
Well, so you're advocating for more money for the community college.
No. Let's.
We got to wrap it up. I was just teasing you there, Reardon.
I like
anyway,
that.
So I want,
Three votes for Montgomery College. All right, good deal.
We're a political talk show, and this is, the political season is already beginning for 2024. This week, President Joe Biden announced his re-election bid. It appears that he's poised to run against former President Donald Trump. Now, I want the viewers to consider this. In 1961, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, in his inaugural address, issued this stirring challenge. Let the word go forth from this time and place to foe and friend alike, that the torch has been passed to a new generation of Americans. Mike, President Kennedy was 41 years old when he made this inaugural address. Joe Biden today is 81. Donald Trump is 76. Isn't it time for a new generations of Americans to serve our country as president?
Oh, I think so. I mean, I think on both fronts, the fact that the two front runners are nearly twice the age of what President Kennedy was when he gave that address, I think is an amazingly stark contrast. I think we have some very talented and potential candidates who are out there who are of the next generation. And I think it's important to see that and to open that door. I was surprised, actually. I guess I'm not surprised that former President Trump was going to run. That was pretty clear from the minute he didn't win the last election that that's what something was going to happen. I am somewhat surprised that President Biden has announced that he's going to run again. And I think that it's important and I don't know, I honestly don't know how we begin to overcome that inertia, but I think we have to, because we need to start getting new thought, we need to start getting new leadership, and we need to start growing for the future. And I think we're still kind of rehashing a lot of the same debates that we've been hashing over for the last 4 to 6 years, because we have the same people in the discussion.
Reardon, what's your thoughts on this?
I believe that whoever's president, it should be who's going to have the best path forward for the United States. Doesn't matter whether they're all old, young, tall, short, black, white, whatever. And I think that's what we need to really focus on. I also think we need to get out of what I call the victim mentality, where it becomes more, I guess, fashionable to become a victim. And we need to, again, focus almost like people did during World War II. There was a common enemy, a common goal, and whoever's president needs to help us.
Well, that's an admirable, thing to achieve. Now, because of your answer, Reardon, I'm going to get complaints about ageism, and I just want to thank you. This is probably your last appearance on 21 this week.
Well, you can edit that out.
Stay tuned for parting shots when we come back from this short break. Welcome back. Now with parting shots, Mike Knapp.
Excellent. Thank you. I've got 3 quick ones. The first one is everyone knows College Park, University of Maryland College Park, and they're the flagship institution. But this past week, UMBC, which has really risen in stature both in basketball and beating UVA in the NCAA tournament, and just in stature educationally under their previous president, Freeman Hrabowski, just inaugurated their new president. I just want to congratulate them on that and moving forward. It's an important piece of education, higher education in the state of Maryland. Second, I want to commend new governor for his first 100 days. Now he's gotten through the legislature. He's navigated that reasonably well, and now he can actually sit down and worry about governing. And I'll be curious to see how the next 100 days go as he gets to actually settle into the office. And then number 3, as we've talked about today on the budget, I think it's really important for our residents to pay attention, because this is going to have a significant impact on them, and people need to pay attention and need to engage in this budget process, because they're going to feel it for quite a while if they don't.
Thank you, Mike. Now with your parting shot, Reardon Sullivan.
One of the main things I wanted to get across to folks, or the options as far as parting shots goes, we're starting a ballot issue committee. Basically, what that's going to do is we're going to work to try to change the county charter to limit the position of county executive to 2 terms. What that will effectively do, it will be limit Mark Elrich to his second term and open it up to hopefully newer ideas, whether it be someone on the county council who may be term limited now, or maybe somebody from another party.
Thank you, Reardon. And thank you, Mike, for both being here today. And I want to thank the audience for tuning in each and every week to Montgomery County's hardest hitting political talk show. For 21 this week, I'm Casey Aiken.